Alright, we've actually got a full battery once while filming a wrap-up. I think this is the first time since I came back to YouTube where I've had a full battery for this, so we should be good. But yeah, hi, welcome to the September wrap-up. September, I'm pretty sure, was my best reading month literally ever. I read a lot in September. In terms of number of books, I tied with January, but in terms of page count, I beat January, making this my best reading month probably of my entire life. So what an accomplishment. So without further rambling, let's get into some stats. So in September, I read 20 books and wrote down that I DNF'd 2. I definitely DNF'd more than that though. I'm still very bad at tracking my DNFs. But yeah, 20 books in September, which was a total of 5,933 pages. Crazy amount for me. And there was 61.5 hours of audiobook listening, which I listen mostly in tandem with the ebook or physical book. But yeah, those are the stats. So let's get into the actual books that I read. Oh, also, it was Orilium in September. I forgot to mention that part. So I'm gonna go through the books that I read in order of like the prompts and the classes that I did for the Orilium Readathon. If you don't know what Orilium is, I will leave a link down below to Chee's announcement video and you can learn all about this wonderful magical readathon. So for this semester, I was getting my adept as a rift architect and also my apprenticeship in crafts mage. So I did have some overlapping prompts to do for these ones, so I did do some of them twice just to get both classes done. So to get my adept in a rift architect, I had to get a Q in inscription. So for O, Art of Decipher, I had to read a title that has all of the letters of my name, and for that one I read Something is Killing the Children, Volume 1 by James Tynion, I think was the name of the author. This one is a graphic novel about a town where a bunch of kids have gone missing and a monster hunter comes to town to figure that out for them. I read Volume 2 as well. I gave both Volume 1 and Volume 2 3 stars. I liked the premise, the art style was pretty cool, but I didn't really care a whole lot about what was going on, and I found the characters to be kind of bland. Well, I don't regret reading books 1 and 2. I'm not planning on continuing the series. It's like a 7-book series, and like the first 2 books were fine enough, but not enough to read 7 books in the series, you know what I mean? So, and then for my Q in inscription, I had to do a color wheel and I got the color teal. So for that one I read The Pairing by Casey McQuiston. This one is a contemporary romance about 2 exes who end up going on the same like food and wine tour across Europe, and in order to prove that they're like totally over each other, they challenge each other to a slut off basically, where they're keeping track of how many people each person sleeps with, because that's totally gonna go super well for them, right? So I really enjoyed this one. I thought the characters were really fun and funny. I loved the setting as well, the whole European tour. I've done backpacking throughout Europe and I loved it, and this book made me miss traveling so much. So I really liked it for that reason. It almost got a 5-star, but I did listen to the audiobook for this one, and a bit more than halfway through it switches POVs to the other main character, and while I liked that character, I think this was just a narrator issue for the audiobook. But the narrator made that character's voice like super dramatic and breathy and like over the top, and it was really cringy to listen to. And yeah, it was a bit much, so that definitely took down my enjoyment for the last like maybe a third of it or so. So I gave it a 4-star instead. And then I had to get a D in spells and incantations. So for the O, I had to read a 5-star prediction. And for this one I read This Is How You Lose the Time War by Max Gladstone and Amal El-Mohtar. This was in fact a 5-star. It was so good. Hi Tony. This is a super weird novella about like 2 people on opposite sides of a time war. The one person works for a company who's trying to change the strands of time to like meet their own needs, and the other side is trying to like fuck up their plans, and these 2 characters like leave letters for each other in different time periods and just like being really petty and taunting each other, and then they're just like, haha, I just changed this thing, and then the other one's like, well fuck you, I changed it back, and they're just like being super petty, and they end up falling in love through these letters. It was such a beautiful book. Oh my god, it was gorgeous. It was so strange and so beautiful, and I loved every second of it. It was undoubtedly a 5-star. This was like one of the best books that I've read in quite a while. I'm so glad that I finally read this one. And then for Q, I had to read a book that was in a video that Chee has posted, and I read Sunbringer by Hannah Kaner. It's the sequel to God Killer. This one I gave a 3.5 star. I did really like it. I just found I was having a hard time kind of getting into it. It's a beautiful story. Like, it's so well written. It's a fantastic fantasy series, and I'm very much looking forward to, I think it'll be the last book. I'm pretty sure it's just a trilogy, but that's coming out I think sometime next year, and I can't wait to get to it. But I think this one just got like second book syndrome, so it was definitely really good, but just not as good as book one. And then for D, I had to steal a book from another TBR, and for this one I went with Evocation by ST Gibson, which is also the Guild book club book for the Order of the Crescent, which is what I'm part of. This was excellent. This one I gave 4 stars. It's like a contemporary paranormal romance about these two people, they're exes, and they're both part of this like cult society where they like summon demons and that kind of thing. They broke up a few years before the start of this book, and the one guy is married now, and one night he gets a phone call from his ex who's just like, hey, I need your help. And the other guy is like being possessed by something and hunted down by some sort of demonic entity. Yeah, this was excellent. It was so good. I loved the characters. I loved the romance. Not a spoiler, it's in the synopsis. This turns into a polyamorous relationship between the 3 of them, and I loved watching that develop and just like watching them fight against their feelings for so long. And also the one character has this like mansion. It was fantastic. And yeah, overall this was a very solid book, and I can't wait to read the sequel as well as the prequel that's coming out, or it's being re-released I think sometime in October, so I can't wait to get to those ones. And then I had to get a Q in Conjuration. So for the O, I had to read a book with a bat on the cover. This was so hard to find, and I'm definitely not the only one. There were a bunch of people who just could not find a book with a bat on the cover, but I did manage to find one, and I read Rise and Divine by Lana Harper for this one. This is the 5th book in the Witches of Thistle Grove series, which is just a series of contemporary witchy romance books. This one wasn't my favorite in the series, but I did still really enjoy it. I gave it a lower 4-star. I like the family that this one follows. I think they're my favorite family in this whole little witchy universe. Yeah, the series follows like 4 families of witches who all founded this town, and each book follows somebody from a different family and just their little romance story. It's a great series. I love witchy romances in general, but especially these ones. I think they're my favorite of the whole like contemporary witchy romance genre. But yeah, the main character in this one, her family are all about like death magic and the afterlife and that kind of thing. They're all like goth and cool as hell. And this character is actually, I forget what they call it, but like she like eats demons basically. She like consumes their souls to kill them. It's cool as fuck. I didn't love the romance though. Just personally, I'm not a big fan of second chance romances, so while it wasn't a bad romance, it just like wasn't personally my thing. And then for Q, I had to read a book that won an award. And for this one, I read Mexican Gothic by Silvia Moreno-Garcia. This one won the British Fantasy Award, the Locus Award, and the Aurora Award. This one was fantastic. It takes place in 1950s Mexico, and the main character gets a letter from her cousin who was recently married and went to go live off in the middle of nowhere in this like giant mansion. She gets a very concerning letter from her cousin talking about like things in the walls and that kind of thing, and she just seems very mentally unwell. So her dad asks her to go out and see if she's okay, if she needs help. So off she goes, and shit goes down from there. This one starts off not slowly, but like not a lot of like creepy stuff happens in the first little bit of it, but once it gets going, oh boy does it get going. This was such a weird book, and I absolutely loved it. This one got like a high 4.5 star rating. Oh, this was so good. I love this author. Just everything she writes is golden. Like, she's so good. Yeah, this was phenomenal. Definitely one of the best ones that I've read from her. Once all of the creepy stuff starts happening, it is just so good. I love the main character as well. She's such a fun character to follow, and I loved seeing her interact with these like super racist, shitty people that her cousin married into, and just like watching her navigate all of their like bullshit rules and breaking the rules whenever she feels like it. But yeah, this was excellent read, thoroughly enjoyed it, and I highly recommend it. Moving on to my apprenticeship as a crafts mage, I had to again do a Q in inscription. So the O, a title with all of the letters of my name in it, and I went for volume 2 of Something of Killing the Children, which as mentioned before I also gave 3 stars. And then Q, I had to do a color wheel again. This time I got the color pink, and I went with Girls Weekend by C.M. Nascosta, I think was the last name. This one was so fun. It was just completely ridiculous. It's about 3 co-workers who go on a weekend away together to a orc nudist colony where it's just like a full weekend of nothing but depraved monster fucking, basically. Yeah, this was such a good time. It was hilarious. I loved the characters. There's like a little bit of plot to it, like, in terms of just relationships forming and that kind of thing, but it was mostly just monster smut. So definitely a good time with that one. I gave it 3 stars. In terms of enjoyment, it would have been a bit higher, but like there's very little actual substance to it, so I couldn't really justify giving it higher than a 3 star. But yeah, this was definitely a fun read. I recommend it if you're a fan of monster fuckery. And then I had to get a D in Artificery. So for O, I had to read a book with the cover the color of my birthstone. And for this one, I read Poukahangatus by Tayi Tibble. This is a book of poetry by a queer Maori poet. It was fine. I gave it 3 stars. I liked some poems, other ones I didn't like very much. So I don't really have much to say about it. I never really know how to like review poetry. It's hard to talk about my feelings on it. But either way, it was good. I liked it. It just wasn't like outstanding by any means. And then for Q, I had to read a book with a non-human protagonist, and for this one I read Thirsty Mermaids by Kat Lee. This is a graphic novel about 3 mermaids. They find a shipwreck one night with a bunch of booze in it, and they get super drunk and come up with the brilliant idea of using a spell to turn human, go to the surface to continue drinking, and get absolutely plastered. So they do that, and then in the morning realize that they have no idea how to turn back into mermaids, so they end up crashing with the bartender until they can figure it out, and in the meantime have to figure out how to pretend to be human and get jobs and that kind of thing. This was so funny. I absolutely loved it. I gave it a 4 star. It was so funny, but also like really heartwarming as well. I was expecting just like a comedy, but there was actually a lot more to it than that. There was lots to do with found family, which was really nice. That's one of my favorite tropes in books. I am a sucker for a good found family. There was also lots to do with body dysmorphia. And yeah, this was kind of a surprising read for me. I was going into it just expecting nothing but a funny time and got a lot more out of it, and I really enjoyed that. Thoroughly enjoyed this one. Definitely recommend it if you are looking for a fun graphic novel to get into, and I'm very glad that I finally got around to reading this one. And then for D, I had to read a book with a number in the title, so I read 1,000 Steps into Night by Traci Chee. This one was just okay. I gave it a 3 star. This one is a Japanese inspired fantasy, and I liked the mythology elements of it. The characters were pretty good. The setting was great. I just had a hard time feeling any sort of connection to it at all. I was listening to it over audio, and I was having a super hard time paying attention to it and staying invested. So I did still enjoy it. It wasn't a bad book, but it wasn't great either. So those are all the books that I had to read for my Orilium classes, and then I read a whole bunch of extras as well. So I read The September House by Carissa Orlando, I think was the author. This one is a haunted house book about this couple that moves into this like beautiful house, and every year in September the walls start to bleed and a whole bunch of ghosts come out, and it's creepy as all hell. And this is their, I think their 3rd or 4th year in this house, and the husband is like, fuck this, I'm out, but the wife is staying. This one was really, really good. I loved like 95% of it. I love books where like the ghosts can be helpful sometimes, because like there are definitely some ghosts in this that are just pure evil, but some of the ghosts are also just helpful. Like she has one that like does her laundry for her and cooks her meals and brings her tea all the time, and I loved that so much. This book was creepy, but it also had a lot of like dark humor to it as well, which is exactly what I've been trying to find recently. I've been trying to find horror books that were also really funny, and this one scratched that itch perfectly. I did end up giving it a 3.5 star though. It was going to get a 4, but the very end brought it down for me a bit. I feel like it ended kind of abruptly. I wish that there was just like even just like 5 more pages afterward just to explain what happened after the climax. The whole big thing happens, and then it's just done. Like, you know what I mean? Like I wanted there to be a little bit more just to kind of wrap things up nicely. But other than that, it was a fantastic read. I definitely recommend for a good like spooky haunted house book. And then I read Garlic and the Witch by Bree Paulsen. This is the sequel to Garlic and the Vampire. It's an adorable graphic novel about this witch who like enchants a bunch of her vegetables in the garden, and they all turn sentient. And in this book they're like gradually turning into humans, and the main character is a garlic bulb. Okay, my camera cut off there, and I don't know if it cut off before I finished talking about Garlic and the Witch. So next up I read You Should Be So Lucky by Sebastian. This one is a queer 1960s romance between a baseball player who's having a bad season, lots of bad luck, and a reporter. This was fantastic. I gave it 5 stars. I couldn't not. This book had me like weeping on the couch. Like it was So, so good. The reporter character, he recently lost his spouse. So this book is heavily dealing with grief as well, and it was so well done. It was beautifully written. I love the romance and like the friendship that you saw between the main character and his like friend group. It was so beautifully written. And the baseball player character is just this like himbo type guy. It was super sweet. And yeah, I love this one. I had to give it 5 stars. It was so good. I love Cat Sebastian. I can't wait to read more from them. After that was the Diablo's Curse by Gabe Novoa. This is a follow-up to The Wicked Bargain, I think it was called. You don't really need to read The Wicked Bargain to get the Diablo's Curse, but if you didn't read The Wicked Bargain first, then you will get spoilers for what happened in the end of it, so keep that in mind. It's weird because on Goodreads it's not listed as being part of the same series, but it is. Like, it's definitely a continuation of it. It takes place after the end of The Wicked Bargain and follows the demon character from that one and what happens to them after the end of that book. This was very fun. So the demon character has to go on this quest to undo all of the deals that they've made with humans. So they do that and they're at the last one and they end up on this like abandoned island trying to find a treasure. This one was good, it was fun, but it wasn't my favorite book. I gave it 3 stars. I did really enjoy it. I liked the setting. It was very YA and not really in the good way. Honestly, I can't really remember what about it I didn't quite like that much. Clearly it wasn't very memorable for me. There was something specific that made me like not love it, and I can't remember what that was right now. I should really start writing Goodreads reviews again. That might be a good idea. Oh, I think one of the things that was bothering me with it was just how convenient everything was, especially with adventure novels. I prefer when there's a bit more of a challenge for things to work out, but with this one it just felt like everything was being handed to them and it was all very easy and convenient. And there was something else, but that was the main thing that kind of lowered it for me. And then I read There's No Way I Die First by Lisa Springer. This is not a typical genre. This one is a YA thriller about a bunch of rich kids throwing a party and there is a killer clown. Not the kind of thing that I would normally read, but I wanted to give it a shot. It sounded pretty good, so I figured why not try it. And it was definitely good. It just, again, wasn't really my thing, so I did give it 3 stars. I don't really have much to say about it, honestly. It was good. I enjoyed it. I read it very quickly. I like read it in one day. It was compelling. It was interesting. It just didn't like blow me out of the water kind of thing. So 3 stars for that one. And then I read She Is a Haunting by Trang. This one is a YA horror about a teenage girl who goes to live with her dad in Vietnam for the summer and very quickly learns that his house is haunted, but nobody will believe her about the haunting, so she and her friends start to fake hauntings in order to get them to believe the real ones. This was fine. I gave it 2.5 stars. I thought it was pretty silly with the whole like fake haunting thing, and like whiny teenagers are really not my thing. I just need to stop reading YA contemporary stuff because I never enjoy it as much as I want to. I like the synopses, I think they sound really good, and then I read them and I'm just like, ew, children, you know what I mean? So yeah, it was fine. It just wasn't my thing, so 2.5 stars for that one. And then I read The Night Guest by Hildur Knudtsdottir, I think. I'm not sure if I'm saying the name right, which was translated by Mary Robinette Kowal. This one is a psychological horror type thing about a woman who keeps waking up very sore in the morning. She has no idea why. Doctors have no idea what's going on, and then she ends up buying a smartwatch and learns that she has been walking like 40,000 steps in her sleep and she has no recollection of it. This was fantastic. It was such a good book. Big trigger warning though for things with animals, especially cats, so do keep that in mind if you're planning on reading this one. I loved this one. It was so creepy and unsettling. The main character is gradually becoming more and more unreliable throughout the course of the book. I don't have much to say about it because like it's a very short book, so if I talk about my feelings too much it'll spoil it, so I can't say a lot, but this was excellent and I gave it a high 4 star. And then the last one I read, Our Hideous Progeny by C.E. McGill. This one is about I think like the great niece of Victor Frankenstein. She and her husband are both paleontologists, and she finds her uncle's letters one day where he's talking about his research and talking about the monster that he created, and she and her husband want to use his research to build a monster dinosaur, basically. Like, it was so interesting and super fun. It was queer as well. I loved the main character. She was so good. This takes place in the 1800s and she's a woman in science and she's not at all taken seriously, and I just loved watching her navigate that whole minefield of dealing with men in science in the 1800s. She was not having any of it. She was mean and angry, and I just loved watching her do her thing. It was so good. This was just such a good book. I highly recommend it. Great for this time of year as well. It was very like rainy and dreary and overcast for the whole thing. I gave it a very high 4 stars. Not quite a 5 stars, but it was almost there. And yeah, those are all the books that I read in September. It's a lot of reading this month. If you've read any of these books, please let me know down below. I would love to hear your thoughts on them. But if not, then tell me what your favorite book that you read in September was. But yeah, thanks for watching, and I will catch you guys later on. Bye.